Well, greetings and welcome to our Spiritual Practices for Tough Times online series. It's such an honor to be with you, and whether you're coming right now through our live stream or if you are going to watch us later today. We thought this would be a great way for us to connect, but also during this time, how do we work with everything that's happening? We're going to have some time for comments. If you want to comment, we'd love to hear your comments because this is the first pilot, it's the first episode, and we'd love to hear what you think, what you think, if things could change. We're also going to ask you in a poll later if you wanted Monday to Friday, or maybe just Tuesday and Thursday, or possibly just Wednesday. So welcome. My name is Trevor Potter, and we're streaming here from McKillop United Church in Lethbridge in a room that we set up just for this, with everything happening. So I hope your day's going well. I hope you're doing okay with everything. And our hope is that this time together of us connecting helps you in this journey of these tough times. I don't know how you're feeling, but I just know that things are continuing on. And if we look at our news headlines over the last couple of days, the Globe and Mail yesterday or the day before had a window closing to halt virus, House officials. Also yesterday on the Globe news site, there was an open letter from 16 emergency physicians in our regional hospital talking about how right now it is time for us to buckle down. They're pleading with us to enact social distancing. Don't go out to the stores unless you have to. Be careful with your personhood and your families. And then, everything's just riling up. If we look at the headlines in the Globe and Mail today, stock market suffers worst day since 1987 as Canada's economy grinds to a halt. So, what do we do? How do we work with this? Well, first of all, I think one of the really practical means is that we have good scientific knowledge, and we acknowledge it. We listen to our health officials. And it reminds me of this clip that a doctor made in Toronto. He's a critical care doctor, and he just wanted to get out there. What is the coronavirus? How do we work with it? His voice is wonderful. It's just a spiritual practice just to listen to his voice. Sometimes we just need to find those voices that help us to calm and help us to take a break. But here's his advice, and here's what we know scientifically about the coronavirus now.
So we need to get the facts straight. How does this virus work? How does it transmit? Where does it want to go? And let's protect ourselves. I'm Dr. Peter Lynn. I'm a family physician in Toronto, Canada. The coronavirus is a family of viruses that can cause as mild things as just a common cold, all the way up to SARS or MERS. These are these bad pneumonias that we're talking about. And basically what these viruses are, they look like a tennis ball with all these spikes sticking out of it. And depending on the type of spike, it allows that virus to attach to certain places. So some viruses, they have the spike that attaches to your nose. So basically you just get a common cold. But the SARS virus and this new virus that we're talking about has the spike that allows it to attach to the cells in your lung. And when it attaches there, it puts in information to make photocopies of itself. So it uses our equipment to make more viruses.
I'm declaring a public health emergency of international concern over the global outbreak of novel coronavirus.
Most of the coronaviruses live in animals. In this particular case, it was from Wuhan. There was a fish market where they were selling live animals. And the thought is that the virus was in a live animal, then it crossed into a human. But then what we found was that people were getting sick in terms of healthcare workers, in terms of family members that were looking after them, which now meant that the virus can pass from human to another human. Just like all viruses, it needs to reach a target, which is your lung. And it has to get there with your help. It has no feet and no wings. So therefore it needs us to move it there. So that's why we keep saying, don't hang around sneezy people because you're gonna breathe it in. And don't touch your face because that's how the virus is gonna get in. The masks are helpful, but they're not necessary because they're leaky. The ones that you and I buy basically have pockets here, so therefore the virus can get in. What the masks really do is they stop us from touching our face. If you're sick, we tend to mask you, so therefore you're not spewing out the viruses to other people sitting around you. The true people that have the real masks are the N95. Those are sealed. These are for the doctors that may be caring for their patients. So in the beginning, the coronavirus will cause kind of like flu-like symptoms or a cold. So people just get the stuffy nose, that kind of thing. But you'll understand that as soon as that virus starts manufacturing in your lung cells, they're producing all these copies of the virus, all of a sudden now you kill the lung cells. So now you can't exchange oxygen. And that's why one of the early symptoms is people get very short of breath and they tend to have a difficult time breathing, and that's why they end up in hospital. So currently, unfortunately, we don't have a direct treatment for the coronavirus. So we don't have a medication that can kill it off. And so it's really supportive. So in other words, the patient can't breathe, we give them oxygen, help them to breathe. They can't drink, so therefore we give them fluids to support them. Their kidneys begin to shut down, we help them with all those things. So it's a very supportive process. This is a new virus that we've never seen before. So our immune system, our army, are having a hard time figuring out what to do. So usually what we have to do is we make something called antibodies. So these are things that can grab onto the spikes that we see on the virus, and it'll get rid of the virus for you, and that will actually bring you back to good health. So therefore the elderly may have a worse outcome, and of course the young children. So the babies, their immune system is not so good either, so they may not make those antibodies as well. So just remember, your hands may be with virus. Virus cannot hurt you because it can't get through the skin, but the moment I do this, now I've brought the virus right to where it wants to go. So let's remember not to touch our hands to our face. So let's say you think that you might have been on a plane or you might have bumped into somebody that has it. What should you do? So the first thing is to contact a healthcare worker to tell them that potentially you have it. If you're feeling symptoms and you're going to go into a facility, call ahead. Okay, so whether you're calling the paramedics or whether you're calling the hospital or your doctor, just mention that you were on a flight. If you don't have any symptoms, then what we do is a little bit of a self-quarantine. In other words, we can just keep you away from other people, and so you don't go into parties, don't go with your friends, don't go into public transportation. So we can contain it very easily by making sure that you do a self-confinement, so to speak, for the, let's say, 7 to 14 days is the longest incubation time. So after that, if you're feeling well, then you don't have anything to worry about. If we get the facts right, then we don't have to be overly worried, but we do the right things so that we don't get the virus ourselves and that we don't pass it on to others. And if we look after each other in this way, this virus will have nowhere to go. It needs us to move it, it needs us to make copies for it, and if we don't help it, then the virus will stop. So we have the power to do that right now.
Have it. There's the plain facts. You know, in some ways, if we can just let our brain absorb this, is that we do have the power as a community and as people that care for each other to really make a difference on a daily action by following just some simple procedures. You know, the infections we see today are a snapshot of people who were infected 2 weeks ago. So, you know, we have one case in southern Alberta, somewhere in the region, and as you go out, you know. So that's a snapshot. And just so you know, on average, it takes 5 days for symptoms to show up once someone's been infected with the coronavirus. And 16 days for one to become critically ill. So we're going to start to feel the pain of social distancing and think it's futile because it's going to take time. We have to realize that we are in this together for the long haul if we really want to make a difference. Dr. Michael Warner, a critical care physician in Ontario, is really trying to help us understand this. He said if 30% of Ontario's population of 14.5 million people become infected, about 5% of the people will need ICU care. That's about, excuse me, I'm caught up in numbers, that's 217,000 patients. Warren pointed out that there are only 400 ICU physicians in Ontario who normally care for 12 to 16 people a day. So that's why it's so important that we just sort of take a deep breath and we start to slow down, and that we just take care of ourselves and we take care of each other. You know, one other little fact is this, that an outbreak is not over until you have 2 incubation periods without any new incident. So if we take that for the coronavirus, the incubation for the coronavirus is about 14 days. And so that means we'd need 28 days in a row without one new infection to say that this pandemic in our area is over. So that's the gist. I mean, how are you feeling? I know that I'm feeling a bit lost, to be honest. I was this morning. I woke up before my alarm at 6:30 in the morning. I got up. I went into the kitchen, made loose tea for my partner and I was walking back and forth in the kitchen just sort of aimlessly, and it came up to mind. I said, I don't know what to do. What am I supposed to do? If we're honest, our routines, our normal everyday routines have been disrupted. I'm an introvert. For introverts, some of us have been saying, we've been waiting for this day where we can just stay at home and not have to interact for people. But maybe if you're an extrovert, this is like going crazy. Then the kids are home. They're not going to school. People from university aren't going. All over. It's like our whole routine has been thrown up in the air. And then for some people, there's just denial out there. Well, it's not going to happen to me. It's not going to happen to us. I drove down Mary McGrath Drive yesterday in Lethbridge and down to the Southside Shoppers Drug Mart because we don't have any Tylenol in the house, and I was going to run in and out. And as I drove past the movie mill, there was like, I had a WTF moment, if I can, excuse me if that offends you, but it was like the parking lot was full. And I was thinking, what are we doing? Everybody needs to be home. So there's denial. And I think there's also this subtle energy. I was sort of sitting still last night and centering into this subtle energy, and I think it's dread and fear. It's what you'd call the liminal zone. It's like the feeling between at dusk and dawn, that feeling you have sometimes at the end of the year, after Christmas, before the new year. It's like there's transition, there's change, there's something happening. It reminds me of this time, and I don't think I've ever really shared this with anybody, but it's when I lived in Boulder, Colorado. And suddenly I started to have this growth on my right breast. It started growing, and I went to see the doctor, and they started doing all these tests, and they heard it was a tumor in my brain, or I had male breast cancer, or all sorts of things they were testing. And I remember then I had to go for surgery, and I had a radical mastectomy for a male. They took 90% of my breast tissue out. And I remember when they sent me home, I was waiting for the results. And it's hard. It was like that feeling of, we know something's happening. I knew I had no control. It was out of my hands. All I can do was care for myself and be present, and it was like that feeling. And that time then, like sometimes like the mind just starts to go crazy. I don't know if you've ever experienced this before, when your mind just starts to, like, the voices and the feelings and the heart races, and it's hard to stay focused. And it's just, it's like Pete Seeger's song about Abiola. You gotta run to the hills, everyone! It's like, and it's like, oh. So I want you to know something. However you're feeling right now, and whatever's happening for you in your life and in your mind, I want you to know it's normal. It's normal. All this stuff that's happening as our routines change, as we don't understand what's happening, it's all normal. I want to tell you why it's normal. It's normal because it's the way we are built as human beings. And the first thing in a spiritual practice in tough times is to accept the normality of our mind and our emotions and our body. Emma McAdam, a licensed marriage and family therapist, is going to talk in a video in a second here about why it's normal. And why it's normal is because it's the way our brains are wired. We have three brains. We have a reptilian brain at our base, we have a mammalian brain, and then we have this neurocortex, which is creating all this wonderful technology so that I can connect with you and we can connect together. And she's going to explain why all these feelings are happening or normal to us as we watch this video.
When Michael's girlfriend broke up with him, he started getting into trouble at work. He would get into fights with his boss and get frustrated and angry in meetings. He came to therapy after his boss said, "You better figure this out or you're not going to have a job here anymore." Becca has an eating problem. When things get stressful at school, all she can think to do is eat, eat, eat. What do both of these people have in common? Their brain is getting in the way of their life. With both Michael and Becca, their deeper brains are interfering with their ability to regulate their life because their brain is sensing a survival threat. This triggers emotions, instincts, and reflexes that they aren't even conscious of. For us to understand our emotions, we need to have a little bit better understanding of how our brain works. So briefly, there are three levels to our brain. The executive state, which is the prefrontal lobes and the cortex. The emotional state, which is the limbic system. And the brainstem, which is the survival state of our brains. Now, the deepest and oldest part of our brain is the reptilian brain, or the brainstem. This part of our brain evolved millions and millions of years ago and is the most basic level of our brain's functioning. Its job is to make sure that we stay alive. It manages survival, reflexes, eating, bodily regulation, things like your heart rate and your breathing, just the very bare bones of keeping us alive. When Becca felt stressed at school, the deep part of her brain sensed a survival threat like a famine and cranked up the drive to eat, as if to store up food resources for later. Now, Becca knew this wasn't going to be helpful in her executive part of her brain, but that wasn't able to stop the reaction in her brainstem. This instinct has helped humans survive for thousands of years, but it isn't very helpful in Becca's specific situation. The limbic system is also called the mammal brain because it's able to think of survival in terms of a group, and it's also a very old part of our brain. So think of a wolf pack hunting together to survive, or a herd of antelope sticking together to fight the wolf pack off. For thousands of years, humans have depended on small groups of people, maybe a village of 50 to 100 people, for their survival. Rejection meant death. This part of our brain manages love, attachment, jealousy, most of the emotions that we feel occur in our limbic brain, and it has a lot to do with our social interactions. So when Michael's girlfriend broke up with him, it triggered this fear of rejection or being kicked out of the village that was necessary for survival. And that elicited the fight, flight, freeze response, this anger that he was feeling that was coming out at work. The outermost part of our brains and the newest, youngest part of our brains is the prefrontal cortex. This is only in humans, and it has the ability to think about the future and use words, create imaginary scenarios. This is the part that we often think of as our mind. It holds conscious thoughts. It has the ability to plan for the future and reason things out. It holds memories and has the ability to think out problems on a complex level. This is the part of our brain that we use when we make intentional choices about the direction we want our life to go. It holds our identity and our life purpose. When Becca knew that it wasn't good for her to be eating so much, that was her executive brain thinking about the future. And when Michael thought, I should get some therapy to help me with these problems, he was using this reasoning power of the human brain. Now, it's important for us to understand these different parts of our brain because when our brain senses a threat, it turns off the upper levels of the functioning in our mind and defaults to the lower levels. So it's going to default to survival first and then attachment and relationships and not being rejected before it's able to really think about, how do I solve this complex problem in my life? So if we want our brains to function well and we want to be able to solve these complex problems, we really need to make sure that the message of safety is being sent to our reptilian brain and that the message of connection and closeness and social interaction is fulfilling the needs of our mammal brain. And then we're able to use the executive part of our brain, which functions to solve problems and make complex decisions. The fact that our brain regresses to these deeper levels when it feels threatened is really functional when it comes to physical threats, but it's not very helpful when it comes to things that we need to think through and plan out. So if we get stuck in our limbic brain, we're constantly making decisions based on emotions or instincts or stress or reactions. We're very reactive and impulsive in our choices. And in order to make conscious and thought-through choices, we need to be spending more time in our executive brain, in our prefrontal cortex. So to do that, we need to feel safe in our bodies and in our minds. We need to notice our reaction to threats. So take a minute, think about when was the last time you felt threatened, and what was your habitual response to that. Thanks for watching. I hope this was helpful, and take care.
Tell me when you're going to switch. So, that makes perfect sense around the toilet paper. Does that help you understand our reaction as people, or some people, around the need and the rush to get toilet paper? It depends what part of our brain we're acting out of. And so the important part of these sessions around spiritual practices for tough times is spiritual practices are not about being perfect. They're not about trying to solve problems. They're about entering into this present moment just how it is. And there's a fourth component to our brain. It's our body. And new research is showing that our brain and all those three parts also have to be connected to our body, because our body has a deep wisdom in it that goes beyond the rational brain, the emotional brain, and the survival brain. Our body has this deep wisdom. And so when we practice different spiritual practices, it's all about connecting all these things together so we can be present. So I'd like to talk to you now about how do we understand spiritual practices. And you might call spiritual practice prayer too. So before we really get into it, I need it now. I don't know if you do. But let's have one practice right now together. I want to talk to you about a very simple practice. I'll do it with you. It's called the 15-second breathing practice. So what you do is that as you breathe in and as you breathe out, you count each breath for 15 times. So, you'd have an inhale and an outhale, and that'd be one. And you'd say in your head, 1. And then after you do an inhale and an exhale, that would be 2. I have to do it for 20 seconds because my brain is so, and my emotions are sometimes just so intense that I need to do that. So what I invite you to do, and I'll count for you, and you might go faster or slower, is just, to sit down, put your feet on the ground, sort of sit up straight. I'm told on camera posture is really important, and it's important to be in our bodies. And then just close your eyes gently and listen to my voice and listen to the music behind there. And just take a moment and take a breath in, and then a breath out, and then a breath in, and then a breath out, and then a breath in, and a breath out. You might want to start to see if you can slow down as we're doing this, as you take a breath in and a breath out. Seven. 8. 10. 14, 15, 16, 17. I don't know. How are you feeling? You know, scientifically, in the brain, they have found that just taking that 15 minutes of seconds of intentional conscious breathing, it actually rewires your brain for a second. It interrupts, all the loops. It doesn't mean the situation won't be there, or how we feel, or kids screaming in the background, or peeling potatoes at the sink, or what I might even invite you to do, if you remember to do this, to breathe consciously for 15 seconds, is when you open your eyes, if you're closing them, when you look out, maybe even remind yourself as you look out of those 15 seconds, what in your view of your sight awakens you to beauty? Or what in the view of your sight awakens you to joy? Because even in the midst of these tough times, there's still beauty, and there's still joy, and there's still life. Normal life is still going on. And I remember as I took a moment this morning when I was wandering my kitchen and I was lost, and I that moment came and I looked out, and there was the beauty of the snow in our garden, the branches, and you could hear the birds starting to sing. And so we don't have to shut down. Spiritual practices are about helping us come back into our body and our heart and our mind, so that we can be present to how beautiful and joyful life is, even in the midst of tough times. So I want to talk to you now briefly about maybe thinking of spiritual practices, and I include prayer in that, and like this. In the Aramaic language, which is the language that Jesus spoke, it's a wonderful language. It's both poetic, and it has pictures, and it's literal. And in prayer, the word for prayer or spiritual practice, as I like to say, is slatha. It even sounds like we're supposed to be a little slower, to slow down. And it literally means to set a trap. And you might see that picture on your screen of an ancient trap. Prayer meant that the literal thing was you set a trap. And what are you setting a trap for? Well, in the ancient languages, you're setting a trap for the divine or the sacred. And it meant, if you were an ancient person hunting this way or trying to trap your food, and sometimes they dug out a bit in the ground too, and they would trap someone that way. It was a state of attentiveness or mindfulness or being conscious. So spiritual practices are these things, and they can be so many things. There's not one or spiritual practice that fits for everybody, and there's not one right one. But it's a practice that helps us come into our bodies and be attentive in this moment. And so I want to use, I'm being Christian-y here, but I thought for me, and it's what I know well, is to try and take us a little deeper, is the words that Jesus said in that prayer he taught his disciples. And I'm going to bring it from the Aramaic. And I want to do it that way just to sort of get us in our neocortex for a moment. So I want you to think. I want to make you think. And it helps me too. It helps us for a second. So I want to explain two things for you that may help you in your daily life and may connect you to whatever is happening in your life, with your family, with your situation. So the first line in the Lord's Prayer is, it's that patriarchal line, how it's transmitted. Our Father who is in heaven. Well, the word for father is not masculine or feminine. It actually has no gender. And what's really interesting is that, and I have to check my notes here, is that it really means that the word for God that we use, and Abwaun is another name for God in Aramaic, it means that there's this energy in our lives that's always generating all of our reality. And also, it means that there is that God is not a person or an object, but it's a presence. It's a presence that unites all of us. And if we break down the 4 syllables in Aboaun, Aboaun, which you could actually do as another spiritual practice if you want. You could just chant that for a while. Is that the A is that means that our whole cosmos is united in oneness. We're all connected. Everything is connected. The Bois is that that this is being birthed in every moment. There's a blessing in every moment, and then that's through you could say through spirit or our breath. And finally, if we were aware enough, we'd feel this in our bodies, and we'd see it in other things. That this is a vibration that we feel in our lives. Now, heaven in Aramaic, if you're really interested, is deboishma. So the first line is ah boaun deboishma. Now, in the Aramaic language, and at the time that Jesus lived, heaven was not a metaphysical place that we go to because we're good people. It literally meant that there was light. Heaven was everywhere, and heaven was in everything, and it was in time and beyond time. And when they said Aboaun deboishma, this one unity, this one source, it's in everything, and it can also mean there's this light shining out of everything. If we had the eyes or the consciousness to see that there's this music, there's this vibration in everything, and it's all connected. And even if we're really truthful, and this is what part of a good spiritual practice does, it's even in a virus. It's in everything. James Finley said this. He said, God is presence that protects us from nothing, even as God unexplainably sustains us in everything. You see, the reality of our life is that as we're going through this time, a spiritual practice is not about fixing things. It's not about magic of making everything okay. Because the reality is that this oneness that holds all of us, that shines from us and the whole of creation, is not our personal jeeves that will fix everything. That the truth is that reality is both the suffering and the beauty. And it holds it all, but it sustains us from it. There's this presence. And part of a spiritual practice is to awaken to a presence that's in us and around us. And to be really truthful, anything could be a spiritual practice. Anything. This is what Richard Rohr says in this next video about prayer, is that, and Richard Rohr is a Franciscan monk. He's in his 70s now. He runs the Center for Action and Contemplation in New Mexico. And in this video, he talks about how every moment of our life can be a spiritual practice.
What is prayer? I think we made prayer into very much a left brain, verbal thing. And I do think there's a place for that. But the very fact that the disciples had to ask Jesus for a verbal prayer could give you the clue that that isn't what they had previously been talking about or experienced. So I'm going to say this, that whatever you do in a state of communion, connection, love, use all of them equally, is prayer. Whatever you do outside of a state of union is non-prayer. So that's why, action and contemplation can come together and really be one. When you're acting out of a state of conscious, loving union with what you're doing, with God, with the person who's across from you, I sincerely believe that's the deepest meaning of prayer. So prayer is primarily a stance. It's a way of being in the world that is a connected way, a way of love and communion, instead of a way of judgment, analysis, critique, you see. And once you recognize that, then you can For example, when the gospel says Jesus prayed for 40 days in the desert, does that mean he said words? I don't think so. But that he walked around putting one foot in front of the other in conscious, loving union with God, his Father, with that rock, with this guy, that's prayer. And that's why twice in the letters of the New Testament it says pray always. Now they can't really mean this verbal thing. They've got to be talking about a state of consciousness. And in many ways that's much harder to maintain. To really do even very secular things, so-called. Of course, then you find out there's nothing secular, because you can do everything in conscious, loving union with God. The dishes, driving to work, making love, whatever, when you're doing it in union, it is a prayer. And I sincerely believe that. I'm not trying to be clever. I believe that.
So, even this moment as I pour a cup of tea for myself, the invitation is whatever we're doing in life, that we just become aware of it. Whatever's happening in life, we become aware of it. That anything can be a spiritual practice. I'd like to really encourage you to feel this, that in you right now, there's a presence. There's a presence in you that will sustain you, a presence that will help you figure out what you need to do next in your life, moment by moment, whatever has happened because of what is happening. There's a presence that helps us through every moment, and it's in everybody, and that's how we can all get through this together. That's how we can all get it through together. So maybe we'll end this time with another 15-second breathing practice today. It's one example of what you can do. So I invite you to maybe close your eyes, put your hands on your feet, and I will count again for us if that's helpful. And so let us, what I'll do is even, sometimes you might want to even create a moment in your life, something intentional each day, where you even just do this. If that's all you can do during the day, do this. Maybe when you get up in the morning or at lunchtime or evening, you might want to, find somewhere to sit. You might light a candle. I mean, you may want to ring a bell. And then you just take that moment. So let us take that moment together right now. I invite you to close your eyes and feel your body. And then begin just to breathe gently and softly as we breathe in. As we exhale, that's one. Two. Three. Four. Five. Six. Seven. Eight. Nine. 10. 11. 12. 13, 14, 15, gently open your eyes and look around. Where do you see beauty? Where do you hear beauty? Where do you see joy just for this moment? Or hear joy? Or does it touch you? We need to take these moments because we're in for the long haul together. And it's such an honor to be with you in this moment, or if you're listening to us later, and want to thank you for joining today. We do have a poll that we'd like to try. It's a poll that, how often do we want this? I don't know if you know me, but I have these intuitions that come up and I go big or go home. But maybe we don't need to do this every day. Maybe it's one of the questions is, do you want to do this Monday to Friday, or would Tuesday and Thursday work, or maybe just once a week on Wednesday? It only works on our Facebook channel. If you want to give us your opinion and you're on YouTube, just write a comment in, and I believe Judy is watching this, and she'll take note of that. So how long do we need? I want to thank our tech team while we're here right now. That's Jim, Brendan, and Marilyn. Thank you for making this production possible. What do we know here? We keep on going. Nope. Oh, wrap it up, they're saying to me. So to wrap it up, a family member sent me this beginning of a prayer from Penticton United Church on July 25th, 1965. I love it. Slow me down, divine. Ease the pounding of a heart by the quieting of my mind. I hope that happens for you today and the days to come. And thank you for tuning in today. We will be back tomorrow and we'll tell you what's happening. Blessings to you. May your mind be quieted and may your heart be open to life. Be safe and be well. Blessings.